This is a fan-generated show. If you would like to support us, please go to jamieglazov.com, and also don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. All your support is greatly appreciated.
Hello, this is the Michael Cutler Moment, brought to you by the Glazov Gang. Appropriately enough, I am Michael Cutler, and I thank you for joining me today. Today's topic is going to be the impact of illegal immigration on healthcare and especially on public health. When folks who are advocates for open borders begin speaking about the immigration crisis, and make no mistake about it, we are having a crisis because of immigration, very often they make reference to Ellis Island. I find that curious because you may not know this, but Ellis Island was actually a quarantine station. It was run by the Immigration Service in conjunction with U.S. Public Health. The purpose back then was to make certain that aliens coming to America did not bring with them dangerous communicable diseases. And let's remember, back then when they opened up Ellis Island, we didn't have inoculations, we didn't have the kinds of sophisticated blood testing that we have today. So the concerns were that you did not want to bring people into America who could possibly spread serious diseases, whether it was tuberculosis, whether it was smallpox. The list was huge. And in the United States, over the years, we have come to expect that we will eradicate all the diseases that plagued us. Mandatory inoculation of school children, whether it was for polio, diphtheria, whooping cough, measles, and so forth. And we did extremely well in protecting our population from the ravages of those deadly and debilitating and scarring diseases. Well, now we are back in a situation that harkens back to the early days of immigration. Because we have so many people crossing our borders illegally, that is to say, without inspection, without having been previously seen by doctors, without having been inoculated to prevent the spread of disease, we are finding a huge surge in the number of American kids who have come down with measles, with resistant tuberculosis, with flesh-eating bacteria. Believe it or not, in Syria, there are sand flies. They're tiny flies that spread this terrible flesh-eating bacteria. All of these things have been happening not only in America but around the world because of the flood of human beings across international borders, and these folks have not been inoculated. They carry the diseases, they spread them to the population, and the results can be devastating. And there's another factor that we also should consider. Not long ago, or perhaps it was a couple of years ago, I was on a television program, and the discussion that we had was about diseases coming across the Mexican border. And the host on this program was adamant and said, my goodness, how in the world can you say that people are bringing bird flu and that sort of disease across the border? Birds fly across our borders. Now, that's true. But here's what wasn't recognized by that host or by too many Americans today. The fact is that when you have people coming into an emergency room seeking treatment, by law, the emergency room doctors and technicians and nurses cannot treat people differently. They cannot say, we have limited serum to treat viruses, limited medication to treat particular diseases. The medications are used on a first-come, first-served basis. So if, for argument's sake, along a land border where people are desperate to get medical treatment because back home in Latin America they're not getting the treatment, if they surge across the border and show up in an emergency room, even if they get the last vials of life-saving medicine, the doctors cannot withhold treatment, saying, we still have a huge community of Americans or lawful immigrants living in this community. We have to care for them first. They can't do it. So if our emergency rooms are flooded with folks from other countries seeking medical treatment for deadly diseases, if the folks who come illegally get to the emergency room ahead of American citizens, we can easily have a situation where when the Americans finally show up, all the medications have been exhausted and there's no treatment available. Tamiflu is a good example of that when there are concerns about influenza and that sort of thing. So please understand what it is that we're dealing with. We are dealing with a health emergency brought on in large measure because the number of people coming into the United States from third world countries where medical treatment is rare and perhaps not even existent at all, if they bring with them dangerous diseases, the potential exists for them to infect Americans, create epidemics in the United States. And this isn't about prejudice. This is about common sense. And in fact, consider this. If you go to another country with your pet dog or your pet cat or your pet parakeet, very often countries will quarantine those animals to make certain that they're not bringing with them diseases. And in fact, the United States, back in the days of Ellis Island, very often would unceremoniously separate families. Tell the husband and wife, your wife has tuberculosis. We're not going to admit her. You have a choice to make. You may enter the United States with your 3 children, but your wife is going home. The only alternative you have is to return to your home country with your wife because she's not getting in. Or it could be that it was the husband who had the illness or a child had the illness. Because the idea, incredible as it might seem today, is that first and foremost, the government of the United States of America felt that the mission was to protect the well-being and the lives of Americans before anybody else. I want to wrap up with this thought. When I worked for the old INS, the Immigration and Naturalization Service, Doris Meisner was the commissioner. And she was adamant about bringing in folks from all over the world. For her, the mission was to have the world come to America. I had a very different viewpoint, not out of xenophobia, but out of an understanding that America could only bear so much of a burden economically, from a health perspective, and from the perspective of national security and crime. But Doris Meisner used to tell us in her memoranda that we needed to have an agency that put the consumers first. Well, you know what? I agreed with Doris Meisner about putting the consumers first, or the customers first. The point in which we both differ, however, Doris Meisner and people today, especially this administration, believe that the customers of our immigration agencies are illegal aliens. I would argue that the customers of all government agencies of this government are the citizens of the United States of America. What a quaint thought. We need to be compassionate, absolutely. But doesn't it make sense, wouldn't it make sense, that compassion, first and foremost, should begin with the well-being of Americans, American children, and the American dream that has become ever more elusive for United States citizens right here in their home country. Please remember, this is not about xenophobia, but common sense and best practices. We must put Americans first, and in so doing, we could show compassion where it rightfully belongs, taking care of our own citizens before we care for anybody else. Hope I've been thought-provoking today. I hope you take it to heart and reach out to your elected representatives. I always like to tell people 2 things. Democracy is not a spectator sport, and suicide is certainly not an act of compassion. I look forward to seeing you again the next time, but meanwhile, please support the Glazov Gang at jamieglazov.com and make certain that you are subscribed to its YouTube channel. Thank you again. So long for now.